Hi everyone, welcome to Apologue, the platform helping you challenge mediocrity one story at a time. My name is James Lau, and today I'm very honored to be joined by Aaron, who is an entrepreneur who started a social media marketing company called Legendary Social Media. So very honored to have you here today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So tell me about the journey, how did you get to where you are today? You're pretty young and you're now CEO and working with like super big clients.
Yeah, thanks. It was definitely a work in progress. It started in 2012. I would say the whole journey started when I was living in Costa Rica. I had been a journalist in a previous life and moved out of the country. And then in Costa Rica, I was looking for ways to use my skills in writing and basically like native English to help local businesses market themselves better to like North American tourists. So that turned into me helping them with social media content, writing blogs, and doing a little bit of website design. And then when I moved back to Canada, that evolved into a bit of like a freelance gig that, and kind of long story long, I branded my freelance gig as an agency. So people thought that I was bigger than I really was. So I just presented things in that way, and that evolved into me becoming so much bigger than I alone could handle. So within a pretty short period of time, I would say it started that around 2015, and then within a year from then I was hiring contractors and pretty quickly a full-time staffer under me, and to the point where earlier this year I had five people working for the agency under me. And a good healthy roster of big clients. So that's kind of how all of that came to be.
What made you want to be an entrepreneur? What made you want to start? Because I know you didn't go to, like, you weren't looking for a full-time and there wasn't something you wanted.
Yeah, I didn't really dream of this. I think because a few things. I mean, my dad was an entrepreneur. He owned grocery stores, so he was like a franchisee for years. So maybe that was kind of my introduction to entrepreneurship. But for myself, yeah, you're right. Like, I wasn't looking to be self-employed. I didn't really even know what that meant, especially being a freelancer or owning an agency like this. I think because I was really forced to work for myself in Costa Rica, that gave me, like, that pushed me into entrepreneurship, where I didn't really have any other options as far as I saw it. And I really liked it. I've always had a pretty strong personality and never loved taking direction from people, and always thought I had a better way of doing things, right or wrong, right? But that kind of morphed into like, yeah, I want to do it the way that I want to do it. That's more rewarding for me, and so that everything kind of pieced together into this like put together puzzle of, me just saying like, I know how to do this well, and I can help people by using my skills like for their marketing. So yeah, that's kind of how that happened. Yeah.
And what would you do differently to get to where you are today? Because I know with a lot of people's journeys, right, there are setbacks in life. So what would you do differently too?
That's a really tough question, because along the way, of course, I think every entrepreneur goes through a journey where there are multiple different stages of mistakes and trials and errors that you go through. So, definitely I've learned from a lot of those. And even now, about 3 years into running an agency like this, I'm still learning and I'm still making mistakes. So it's hard to say what I would do differently, because even if I did things differently, I would make mistakes doing those other things too. The one mistake that I think impacted me most was when it came to pricing out my services. So because I started as a freelancer, I was offering services at a really a low freelancer rate. But then when I transformed my business into one where I had employees and salaries that I had to pay, my pricing structure as a freelancer didn't work anymore. And so while I did increase prices a little bit along the way, it kind of left me in an awkward position where for quite a while I was honestly offering services for free for people, just to kind of keep the business alive. And I wish that I had taken the time maybe to talk to somebody about that transition from being self-employed as a freelancer or on your own into running a company where you're responsible for other people's salaries and what is involved there, right? So Like that said, I was always able to cover my salaries, which is great, but my time was free. So that's an important transition. I think that, you know, if other people are going to start their own businesses, to know that what works for you to be on your own pricing wise doesn't necessarily work on like as you scale your business. So talking to somebody about what that looks like, like having a mentor maybe in the industry who's gone through that transition, or at least can help you decide, you know, once you do have staff and rent and other costs that are involved in running a business like this, like, you know, how do I price myself in order to cover all of those and still get paid?
It's always tough to raise prices, especially if you already have clients like, hey, you know, I'm gonna start charging you this amount.
For sure. Right. Yeah, that was a really interesting part of the journey actually, because I did have to do that with a lot of clients. Some of them, I have clients that I've worked with since technically before I even became a freelancer. So like we're talking like 4 or 5 years together. And along the way there have been multiple price increases. And I think that while people look at that as being a really difficult thing, as long as you're really offering a quality service along the way and people know you and trust you and they know what to expect, and you can present that price increase in a way that's like, you know, I need this for me, right? Because that is important to you and to the client. Like the client needs to know why you're doing this, but also say like, you know, this enables us to continue offering the same service. Whereas if we stay at the rate that you're at now, I actually just can't do it anymore. You know what I mean? And so that's when you put that to a client, that's kind of the options that they have to weigh. And as long as you present it in a way that's really favorable to the client, then they've been really amenable to that.
You mentioned, you know, having a mentor in the industry would kind of help guide you along the way. So speaking of mentors, you know, who has the biggest influence on your life and on your journey?
Yeah, that's a really good question too. I mentioned my dad a little bit before because he was kind of an entrepreneur in his own way. So I did have a little bit of exposure to that growing up. Really the biggest influence on my life has been my husband. He is an entrepreneur through and through. Like that guy could never be gainfully employed by anybody else in his life. He's so strong-headed and like he's just built to be a business owner. And he really guided me along the way. So he's the kind of guy who's always reading business books, like how to get better in business, mindset, just talking to people with different ideas on how to manage money, manage staff, like employee retention being a really important element. So he's been my guide, and really the reason why he's such a guide is because he's like we work in the same space. When we were both working from home, we were in the same space. So like he's always there. He's always talking about business. So he's always in my ear giving me ideas and things like that. So he's definitely been the biggest influence because of that. Another big one that I would mention is, I gave you the 4-Hour Work Week from Tim Ferriss. Yeah. That was a really big book in my life too. I read that when I was in Costa Rica. Yeah. There's a lot of philosophies in that book that I really adhere to and that I really believe strongly in, that it's about working smarter, not harder, outsourcing things that you can outsource, relying on people to help you, right? And giving up a little bit of control because that gives you a better life. So he's been quite influential. I subscribe to his podcast as well, and he's always got Tim Ferriss is all about improving every aspect of your life. Like he's like the ultimate life hacker. So he's been pretty cool too.
Yeah, I read the book and I think it talks a lot about how you shouldn't try to micromanage. And I think a lot of people, especially if you're a business owner, you don't want to give up too much responsibility. What if they take over my business, right? And I think it's that. So I'm giving you responsibility, but it's just so I can free up my time to do other things. So.
For sure. Right. It is so. I talked a lot about that transition from freelancer to agency, and that's actually a really important point that you bring up too, because that's kind of a crucial point in another way. Because when you then have you're going from yourself to now having an employee. That employee, your livelihood depends on that person, and I think that person knows that for the most part. So that's a tricky thing too. To there is an element of maintaining control and ownership of your company at that stage where you're transitioning, and even when it is just the two of you for a time, if that's the case, and making sure that you're in charge of the quality standards and general control of the company, but also being able to let go to a certain point to that person. That's an important thing for people to consider as well, that they have to balance those things at that point.
I'm sure as your journey as a CEO and with the side hustles, there are high points, right? There are proud moments, right? But there are also low points, right? And I feel like you learn most from those mistakes and those low points. So why don't you share with us, your proudest moment, and as well as the lowest point?
So that's a good question. I would say, okay, proudest moment is I signed earlier this year. I signed a client which is pretty well known here in Vancouver. It's like a local coffee chain, I guess, that most people would know about. And the reason why that came about is kind of interesting. So my marketing area of focus has always been the SEO of my website. So I worked relentlessly on improving my website for years and years and years, to the point where I became the top search result on Google if you typed in social media Vancouver. Because of that, this coffee chain approached us saying that they wanted social media services, and I knew that they had also been talking to other social media providers in town. But I have a really interesting, or maybe different, communication style than a lot of people, where I'm really like to the point, like here's what you need, and let's cut out kind of like the fat. And the reason they chose us is because so they sent us an email requesting social media services with a few questions, and my reply was very like short, to the point form, here's what you need to know, and that's why they ended up going with us, and we've had a good long-term-ish relationship with them now. So that was kind of like the landing of my biggest, most higher profile client, which is pretty exciting. And I learned a lot since then about how to deal with larger corporate clients since that point. So that would be a high point for sure. On the low point, it's kind of relating back to what we were talking about earlier with learning how to price your services appropriately, I guess. So when I'm talking about like to be totally open, this past year, I only started paying myself about a month ago. So I took a whole year without paying myself, and that was because of mistakes that I had made with not pricing myself properly, hiring too much staff, and really not looking at my books. I'm really bad with numbers. I'm a journalist. Don't ask me to do accounting. It's awful. It's awful. That's just that's a weakness that I have as a business owner, right? And it's you have to be pretty well-rounded as a business owner in order to do it successfully. So I had a year of where my business was doing well, good revenue, great clients, having a lot of fun. But I was broke and working a lot of hours for free. I just had a baby too, which was it sucked. I was coming into work, leaving my baby for half the day with the nanny, and not getting paid for that. And it was just really, it really eventually, it was a struggle to work through, but it eventually really wore me down and affected my self-esteem and my belief in myself as an entrepreneur, I guess. So it's been a tough year, but I'm very happy to say things are much better now. We're looking good. Yeah.
I mean, now you're getting paid. She just came back from a trip to Hawaii. She's getting her second baby, so I think life's good so far.
Yeah, no complaints. I'm super happy.
Awesome. So now we come to a segment of a day in a life, right? Yeah. So I think a lot of people want to know what life is like as in a social media agency, right? There's owning it, and there's also working that space. So you want to tell us what's the day in the life of a social media agency? What is it like?
Yeah, for sure. So there's a lot that goes on when you manage social media. It's really busy. Our jobs are not just managing social media, because what does that really mean, right? So I would say my work is very different from my employees' work. So I'll look more at what an employee's day in the life is maybe, and then kind of talk to you about what mine is like. So my staff I think they usually do their morning check-ins in terms of engagement when they first come in. So that's usually about half an hour to an hour of checking on their clients' accounts, making sure that comments are all responded to, liking photos and things on Instagram, following other people, looking for direct messages on Facebook, that kind of stuff. So like that day-to-day like check-in and engagement, growing accounts, that kind of thing. From that point on, there's usually a few hours spent on content creation. So that's a huge part of social media management, where you are writing captions, finding photos if that's the part of the plan that you're doing for your client, and putting those photos together into like an Instagram feed, or finding links for Facebook, researching hashtags, all of that. And so basically the way our model works is we create a content calendar. So every day, here's your caption, here's your photo or link, blah, blah, blah. And we plan that out for a month for our client, basically. And send that for review, blah, blah, blah. So that content creation side of things has research involved, and checking out the client and looking for photos, blah, blah, blah. So there's a lot of work to be done there. So that's a big chunk of the time that's spent. And then usually in the afternoon, there's a second client check-in on the account. So usually posting to Instagram for them, looking for more messages and comments and that kind of thing. So that's kind of like the basics of a day in the life of a social media manager. But as a social media agency owner, my days are really spent on, good question. What do I do all day? It's a lot of client management, to be honest. I spend a lot of time communicating with clients, and that is to ensure that we are providing a good quality service. So that can be, doing phone calls and emails to clients to check in with them and make sure that they're happy with their last month of social media content, to see if there's anything that we need to change going forward. Talking about billing, that happens a lot. And just like general accounting work is, that always takes up a chunk of my day, like invoicing and things like that, payroll, all that kind of fun stuff. Client management, and then business development takes up a little bit of that as well. So often I look for clients that I want to work with, and then I'll work with my team to come up with a great strategy around how to present the service to that client, like a proposal. And then creating proposals takes all kinds of time too, so that's always fun. And then I would say the bulk of my time comes down to reviewing and QA. So everything that my staff create comes to my desk before we send it to the client. So that takes up the vast majority of my time, is reading every blog, reading every content calendar, every caption, looking at every photo before it goes out for review, so that I know what's going out there, even though I'm not creating it myself. So that's the.
And what would you say is the most interesting part about working in a social media agency or owning a social media agency, and like the worst part? Yeah. I'm guessing it's the numbers.
Yeah, personally, yeah. The worst part is the numbers. I just hate accounting and bookkeeping. I'm terrible at it, and yeah, like that's just like, and it wouldn't matter what kind of business it was. For me, that would just be like, yeah, I could do without that for sure. Luckily, there are people who can take care of that too. The best part is I love social media because it is a very fast-paced environment. We have deadlines every day, and usually like halfway through the day, right? Like there are deadlines every few hours, really, in terms of posting and engagement and things like that. The social media landscape is always changing. Like there are algorithm updates that are happening all the time. Advertising policies are always changing. The best way to grow an account is always changing. So it's cool because it keeps us on our toes. Yeah. And I love that kind of variety, I guess, that comes with social media, because you've always got to be researching and reading and talking to people about what's new, so that you can provide the best service to people. Yeah.
And I know for like client-based work, like a client-facing sort of role, especially in an agency, getting your first client is probably the hardest part, right? would you say?
Yeah.
And I'm just curious, what's that process like? Especially being, coming from like a freelance sort of role to, hey, I'm an agency.
Yeah. So once again, like that's such a big transition, and where those two things are really different, in my eyes at least. Getting my first client was easy for me. And it's a client that I still work with in some capacity. So when I started out as a freelancer and was like just marketing myself as a freelancer, I was, on all of those kind of like freelancer sites, right? Where you can offer your work to people all over the globe, which is great. And it makes it really like quite easy to have business come in, and then you have to be smart and competitive about how you present yourself in order to secure that client. So getting that first kind of freelancer client was easy for me because where I could be in order to be seen by clients was simple. Transitioning to an agency was much harder. So now I was looking for a lot more local clients who had more money to spend and wanted a different level of service. That became really important to me. And that's what was really tough because I've told you before, James, like I door knocked forever. Like I would just go around the streets of Vancouver and like knock on business. I would like stand outside of the business and check their Facebook page at the time, because Facebook really was big, and we weren't really using Instagram for marketing. I would check their Facebook page and see how bad it was, and if it was pretty bad, I would go into the business and be like I can get you more customers because of this and this, so like please work with me. And oh my god, it didn't work at all. And I think a part of why that didn't work is I was still new, so my confidence in myself was a little bit low. I didn't know much about the industry yet. I was still learning. And I think those kind of two elements really came through for people, and so I didn't portray trustworthiness at the time. So, and that's an easy fix for people. I've learned since that you don't need to know anything about your industry in order to work in it. And that's like you should, but you don't really. Like you have business owners who will buy, you have business owners who will buy a business and can sell that business without knowing anything that goes on the operations side, which is totally incredible. Yeah. I mean, that's not how I do it, but like it's possible. As long as you have confidence in your business though, and really it comes down to believing in yourself that, here's a motto, by the way, that I think every entrepreneur should live by. Say yes and figure it out later. Okay, that was like how I went from zero to hero or whatever, right? Is like, I would say yes to everything. My client would say, can you do blah, 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 an e-commerce site, a website? In my mind, no. Oh my God, I don't know how to do that. But I would say yes, and then I would figure it out later. And say yes with confidence, because you can figure it out and you will figure it out. And you will do a good job as long as you are you passionate about delivering a good service to your client. So once, for those few kind of early bites that I got, and I will say a lot of those clients came from connections that I had in town, like my husband working in the construction industry. Like when I started, most of my clients were construction based.
Awesome. And you mentioned that when you started off, the door knocking. A lot of people think like getting clients is about how many people you can go and like, hey, I can do this for you. At the end of the day, it's about the mindset and the confidence, right?
Yeah.
I think a lot of people have like an imposter syndrome, right? Especially being young. I think you were in your 20s at the time.
I was. Yeah.
You're like, oh, how can I run an agency? Or like, how am I even good enough for it?
Exactly. Yeah. And that imposter syndrome is a big deal, and it really boils down to confidence. Because you're right, like the thing is, whether you do door knocking or you go to networking events or you just have a really big personal network of people that you can tap into and say like, hey, I'm starting this business, I need clients, like do you know anybody who needs this service or product or whatever it's going to be. Whichever way you go about your marketing or your business development, and there are a million ways to do it. If you do it with confidence, you will be successful. Because that's what I'm talking about with like those business owners that know nothing about what they're actually selling. They can still sell it, and it's because people trust them because they are confident in what they're talking about.
One other question is, what skills do you think is required for success in this industry? Or I think it's a little bit of the confidence and being sure of yourself. But are there any key skills that maybe we should learn in school, or something that you wish you learned before? Or...
One thing that people don't necessarily think of when it comes to social media is being able to communicate effectively. So maybe that's the better way to present that is, you need to be able to be an effective communicator and how to translate what's in your mind onto essentially paper or a spreadsheet. So that's kind of a big one for social media. You also need a bit of an eye for what works and what doesn't work, for what would work for your client and what works in general, that kind of thing. So you need to have a little bit of research skills and be open and receptive to new ideas, I guess. Other than that, honestly, if you don't know anything about social media and you start reading blogs and you start looking at social media accounts that are doing really well, you can very quickly become an expert, which is a really cool thing for this industry. On a business owner side, oh my God, like I said before, you need to be well-rounded and be pretty good at everything, which is cool because I was always, as a journalist, it was a cool translation to go over to being a business owner, because as a journalist, you need to know a little bit about everything as well, because you need to write accurately about things, and it's kind of the same as being a business owner, where you need to know a little bit about every aspect of running a business, but you don't necessarily need to be great at all of them. Like, I suck at bookkeeping and accounting, but I'm really good with, I have a great relationship with my staff and my clients, which is honestly the most important thing in my eyes. And yeah, my marketing technique was SEO, and I'm really good at that too. So that has paid off in terms of business development for me, because the door knocking thing was not, I'm not cut out for that, or that's just not my preferred avenue of business development. So, yeah, learn as much as you can about how to run a business and all of the various aspects of it, because you're going to need to use those in some way until you have enough money to pay somebody else to do it for you. Yeah.
There's someone who wants to go into a social media agency, maybe not own it, but work in it. Someone's super passionate about social media. I know a lot of people who are, right? They just live and breathe by Instagram or whatever.
Yes.
What do you look for when, say, you're hiring for staff?
A lot of different things. So being a good communicator for me is the most important thing, because I can teach you how to spell and I can, right? Because sometimes a lot of people are kind of bad at that. You can autocorrect everything. So I can teach you how to spell and how to formulate a sentence, but you need to be able to communicate well. And what I mean by that really is understanding what understanding what your client's customer wants to hear from you, right? Or wants to hear from the client, right? So you have to think down the line, put yourself in the shoes of that customer, and then put yourself in the shoes of the client in order to create a message that you can put out for that. So that's a complicated process, and it usually, I can't really explain how I get that out of somebody, but it's kind of a sense that I get after talking to them for a while, of knowing can you wrap your head around this? So that's really important, because one thing I did learn along the way is that having a passion for social media and managing your own personal social media account is not the same as working for a social media agency, because managing your own personal social media is you get selfies all the time, and you get to talk to your friends or people who are oh, I love your pictures and blah blah blah. That's really exciting because it's self-fulfillment. But what's important for working for a social media agency is getting self-fulfillment from seeing the success of another entity, right? So when your client does well, that needs to be satisfying and needs to translate into success for you.
Awesome. Yeah. So just to close, just to wrap up, are there any general advice for people who want to go into this?
Yeah, I would say if you can, try to mentor at an agency, right? If you want to be in a social media agency, try to mentor or do an internship in an agency to see what that life is like. Because like I said, really importantly, if you love social media, that doesn't mean you're going to love working for an agency or even being a freelance social media manager. So you need to kind of test the waters and see if that's going to work for you. even just sitting down, you know, if you can take a business owner out for coffee and pick their brain about what it's like, what they like and what they don't like about the business, it's funny how this is all happening. Yeah, exactly. Like, ask them what a day in the life is like for them. That'll give you a lot more perspective that might be quite different from what you imagine the job is like, right? So I think those are really good tips for like individuals who are considering this as a career path. In terms of a business owner, like, yeah, really just learn as much as you can. There are so many digital courses that you can take now on business in general, how to set up a business, how to do accounting and bookkeeping, how to manage clients, how to manage your staff, how to work with different different software and things that you're going to need, how to market your own business, which I think a lot of businesses don't really think about that, and a lot of like mindset training on how to stay positive when times get tough, because that it can be really draining. And the one thing I will say about that is, like, there's always a light at the end of the tunnel, even when it feels like you're just drowning in hell. Like, it's like you just, if you can survive that and like do your best to improve things, even slowly, bit by bit along the way, like, you will come out the other end and you'll be a much better person for it because you've learned a million things. That said, like, glean as much as you can off others. So I talked about Tim Ferriss before. If you can read the 4-Hour Workweek, I think it's a little bit outdated now, but there's still a lot of the philosophies that apply to today, to business today. Another book that I really liked was, there's one called Smart Cuts. Can't remember who wrote that one. That's a really great book as well. Talks about kind of the similar concept of working smarter, not harder. Different, like, I don't know. Yeah, Tim Ferriss and Tony Robbins are really great mindset guys on how to be like a stronger, better person. And I think that's really the most crucial element of being a business person, is just being strong and confident and doing your best all the time. Yeah.
It's interesting because when I, ask for recommendations for books and resources, you would expect like, we do this course on like digital marketing, but a lot of the books you recommend is like all mindset.
Yeah, it totally is. Like, yeah, because like, yeah, you can take a digital marketing course in a weekend and whatever, but like, what's really going to help you succeed is learning a mindset. I think, like, you can learn any skill, because whether it's social media or it's running an avocado toast food truck or whatever, it doesn't really matter what it is that you do. If you don't have the right mindset of what it takes to be an entrepreneur, which is confidence and being able to be a bit of an expert in everything, and wanting to learn and being interested in self-improvement, like, you can't do well without those interests.
Yeah. So we come to the end of the interview.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Erin, for sharing your insights and what life is like as a social media agency owner. So once again, legendary social media. If you have any social media needs, you know who to go to. I'll have all the links in the description. And make sure you build that mindset of a entrepreneur or whatever you're trying to go into. I think it's a lot about the mindset, and I hope you learned something from Erin today. So once again, Apologue is a platform that helps you to dream bigger and to better identify your career goals through stories and insights from professionals. My name is James Lau. Thank you for watching this episode of Apologue, and I'll see you in the next one.